On Monday, South Sudan's president announced that government forces defeated a coup attempt following a night of fierce fighting in the capital. Arise News contributor Frankie Edozian joins us to discuss South Sudan and other hotspots in Africa, and hotspots indeed they are. But let's talk about Africa's newest country.
Yes, really the world's newest country.
Well, yeah, there's somewhat of a tempest in a teapot here, I would say, on the world scene. Yeah.
It appears that the more things change, they stay the same. One of the reasons why South Sudan was actually created was because of trouble with an oppressed minority. In this case, it was the Arabized Sudanese versus the Dinka and the Nuer in South Sudan. Now in South Sudan, we have a situation where the Dinka are the majority and the Nuer are the minority, and the Nuer feel oppressed. So the president fired his cabinet, including his vice president, who is from a minority region, and all of a sudden this weekend there was an explosion of crisis. Hundreds of people rushed to the UN for safety because these people feel so oppressed, and so they try to have a coup d'etat in this new country.
We're talking about the UN as well as the U.S. Embassy as well.
Yes, indeed. And the U.S. Embassy as well as the United Nations Special Envoy there says they're in touch with all of the players. They want to appeal for calm. President Kiir has been on television saying that this was an attempted coup, but it has been squashed. He's in control. And one of the most important things that he said was that the Sudanese Liberation Party, which is a party which he comes from, will never agree to a transfer of power by force. Any transfer of power has to come from the ballot box. So that is good to hear for this new country.
We're talking about an ethnic conflict there, and I just want to segue over from there to the Central African Republic, because they also are having some problems there. Ethnic conflicts mostly. Explain to us what's going on over there.
So over there, it is ethnic conflict, but it's also religious, Christian versus Muslim. And in the last couple of weeks, the Christian fighters have been in the bush, and they have been trying to get rid of President Michel Djodotia, who is Muslim and came into power by force in March of this year. Reporters from the Associated Press were able to penetrate the banana trees and the bushes and talk to some of these militiamen. And what they had told them this weekend is really disconcerting. They have said there will be no reconciliation. The only thing they want is for the president to be forced out of the CAR. The French troops have about 1,600 boots on the ground. And they are a bit, not overwhelmed, but they're having difficulty reaching these Christian militias because they're in the bush and they're in hiding, but they are coming out to fight. And they're saying that they will not put their machetes down until Michel Djodotia is out of Bangui as the president of the Central African Republic.
This is not the only country where we see this religious conflict. We're seeing it somewhat in Nigeria as well as the Boko Haram, where they don't want any kind of Western education as a sin. We're seeing it there. We've also seen it in Sudan and other countries. I guess the question I have in the Central African Republic, do you see any point where we will have any outside influence or interference with what's going on there?
Well, really what's going on there is indeed an external influence, because Muslims and Christians have lived peacefully in the CAR until this year. And what many people believe is that these are external mercenaries, Al-Qaeda and Islamic Maghreb from the Sudan and from other countries that have now penetrated into Central African Republic to try and create another Islamic state.
Now, how much should the world be concerned about Al-Qaeda rearing its ugly head in some of these sub-Saharan countries?
Very much so, because Al-Qaeda, as it stands now, is a loose terror group. But they have a lot of people pledging allegiance to them. And so in Africa, with Boko Haram, Ansarut, Al-Qaeda, and Islamic Maghreb, all they have to do is to say we pledge allegiance to Al-Qaeda and cause a lot of havoc. Many of them don't quite seem to know what it is they exactly want outside of an Islamic-only state, which is not enough for many of their citizens. Even people who support them say that's not enough.
And of course, Al-Qaeda influencing a lot of these terrorist groups on the young. Let's move on here. Jacob Zuma asked to step down by Thabo
Mbeki.
Now, here, explain something to me. He's asking him to step down, but he also he was asked to step down, and he did because of alleged misuse of power. Who is he to? Isn't that the pot calling the kettle black here?
Well, in a sense, but if you recall over the weekend when, well, not over the weekend, when they had the Mandela Memorial, Thabo Mbeki got a standing ovation. So that means that people are really feeling that maybe we really misjudged him. Now, Mr. Mbeki had a lot of problems on his own, but nowhere near the level of corruption that Jacob Zuma is being accused of.
And in all fairness to him, a lot of that had to do with the infighting between him and Jacob Zuma prior to Jacob Zuma taking over.
They do have a history, and he lost to him the chairmanship of the ANC. But what is interesting is that Thabo Mbeki for the last 5 or 6 years has been relatively quiet. So for him to, basically he's seizing an opportunity to say, look, when it was my turn and people didn't want me anymore and they asked me to step down, I gracefully exited stage left. Now it's time for Jacob Zuma to do so if the ANC does not want him anymore.
And you see that
is
happening?
the qualifier, is that if the ANC does not want him anymore.
Look, there's controversy here about Jacob Zuma for a number of things, but once again, this house that he spent, it was $19 million on to upgrade his house, where
For
you have a lot of
security
people.
purposes and things like that.
19 million, Frankie?
Well, this is the rationale behind it, is that, you know, he does have a huge family, and this is part of the problem in South Africa with Jacob Zuma. He has 4 wives, and they're all on the state payroll. I mean, Mr. Mandela. So he does have 4 first ladies. So there is also the $1 million for his household, you know, in addition to his 20 children. So there are a lot of small things that have pushed a lot of South Africans over the edge. The house is just one thing. You know,
So I'll get 3 more wives, and I can get $19 million.
If you're a polygamist and if it's legal in your tribe, yes.
Okay, let's move on here. We don't have too much time left. But this story here, it really interests me. It says Africa embraces Islamic finance. And this is really interesting here because we're talking about sub-Saharan Africa. Of course, President Obama goes in there and talks about putting billions of dollars in, getting private companies to come. But it looks like Islamic finance is a big thing. Nigeria has brought on board to this, Senegal, South Africa.
South Africa is thinking about it. What this is it's actually, if you think about the scramble for Africa in the current era, it's mainly Asia, China, Japan, and of course the United States. Middle Eastern countries where they have a lot of petrodollars and they basically have a lot of money to spend are now saying maybe Africa is a good place for us to invest. Now, Islamic bonds are a little different from conventional bonds because
they're cheaper repaying, from what I
they're
understand.
cheaper and they don't charge any interest, which is against Sharia. And so that is very attractive to African governments who want to try this because they will be cheaper for them to pay off and they'll feel like this is a much easier group of people to deal with because one, they do have buckets of money versus doing bonds with the United States or Europe. So in Nigeria, there is a port that's being built with that and around the country, around the continent as well. So this may be a good thing, but it'll take a few years.
I wish I could borrow some of those bonds.
You have to be Muslim.
Okay, well, I guess that's not going to happen for me. Frankie Edozian, thank you so much. You're always insightful with great information.
Thank you, Julian.
Okay.
All right.
And thanks for watching Arise America. Join us tomorrow.